Today we're going to talk about people who look at life and say, it's not about me. March 2020. Let's think back. We all thought, or we hoped, that shelter in place, quarantine, masks would be a 2-week thing. 1 year later, it's nowhere near over. Now, throw on top of COVID all the other things we faced: the social unrest, the protests, the mounting COVID death toll, a divisive election, and the aftermath of that election, loss of jobs, failed small businesses, lack of civility, loss of social community, and choosing sides rather than finding a common ground. Yelling and vitriol has replaced talking and listening. Yet despite all this hostility and anger, an 8th grade English teacher in Aurora, Illinois, found story after story of people performing extraordinary acts of kindness, of grace, love, and support simply because they saw a need. My name's Frank Zaccari. This is Life Altering Events. My guest today is Layla Groleau, and this is our 8th grade teacher from Aurora, who heard these stories about these selfless acts. She heard so many of these stories, and she wrote a book. And the book is Worst Case Scenario, Best Life Ever. If you have not read this book, buy it today. You can get it on Amazon. You can get it directly from her. And if you love this book, and you will, I have read it, you may want her, or you will want her, to come and speak at your events. And she's available for that also. So, Layla, welcome to Life Altering Events.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
I read your book. We spoke earlier, and so many of these stories brings tears to your eyes. What was the inspiration to first find these stories and then write them?
Well, like you said, Frank, we were communally, right, as a country, in the midst of these earth-shattering, negative, isolating things going on in our country. And add on top of that whole pile that you mentioned, anything you may have been dealing with personally. And I mean, all of us remember those beginning stages of the pandemic where stay at home, don't even go to the grocery store, It was quite isolating. There was a lot of fear. And I remember being absolutely astounded by the remarkable people that were surfacing that are all around us, just normal, everyday people that were in the midst of their own crises, suffering, issues. They were uplifting, they were overcoming, they were standing up for others in such a way that I've not seen in this generation. It kind of reminded me of those stories and documentaries you would see during World War II. Or, there were the victory gardens, and everybody was everyone's rolling up their sleeves. Everyone's doing whatever it takes to help your neighbor, your friend, your stranger down the street. This is what I saw. And I was so overcome with the goodness that I felt compelled, like I had no choice but to receive and seek out there's thousands of stories. There should be, right? But just to seek out a really good selection of examples of these, what I call these humble heroes, and reminding us of the goodness of humanity. I thought we've got to have a history of this time that isn't showing just the negativity. And more than kind of sweet, poignant stories, which I think they are, I think it's really important that we take the lessons from these stories for our posterity, for our kids, for our grandkids, and for ourselves. There's going to be a new crisis around the corner. I mean, it might not be this bad. There's going to be personal crises. And I just think it's really vital that we take the lessons that we learned from these humble heroes and from our own experiences, pack them in our toolkit, and get them out and use them. So
Absolutely. Now, you're an 8th grade teacher.
mm-hmm.
You had to learn how to teach all over again. You had to learn distance learning, all those fun things.
Fun.
You became a daycare provider for your grandchildren. You taught classes. You tracked down these stories. How did you do all this?
If I hadn't felt so compelled, I'm sure I would have given up earlier. But it was, once I got started, there was no stopping. It was something I felt I had to do. But it was quite a challenge. I was learning, as you said, learning a new job. All of us were, as most Americans were, right?
Yes.
So it was challenge. It was really just stressful. And I was, learning how to not just Zoom, but every single thing we teach had a new format, a new way of doing. And 2 of my grandkids, their daycare shut down.
Absolutely.
Let me help.
Mm-hmm.
School ended. I would watch them. And then, well, when am I going to interview people? Well, nap time. Yeah, nap time. I had to schedule Zooms. And then I'd write off until 10 or 11 at night. Not what I had planned for my summer, but I felt so compelled, so inspired that I just had to do it. So, and the cool thing was, Frank, that in the middle of, you listed some of those feelings that many of us went through and experiences. I also had some personal issues go on this summer that were really painful. And in the middle of that, I didn't really want the extra work, but every time I interviewed 23 stories and I don't know, 26, 27 people I interviewed, every time I interviewed another person, I laughed with them, I cried with them. We revisited all those experiences, and I was so personally uplifted. And my mindset began to shift each time. Here's the big world we live in.
Mm-hmm.
Have this craziness, this chaos that we will always have some form of. And yet, there's so much goodness. So it was really great for me personally to hang out with these people from all over the country.
It's amazing that positivity generates more positivity. And
it is contagious.
Whatever you feed comes back to you.
Right.
Layla, one of the things that, as I read the book, there was this underlying theme that I picked up. And the theme that I heard and saw was, I did what I did because I saw a need. It was never about me.
Right.
Tell us about that mindset these people had.
It is a recurring theme. As a matter of fact, at least 2 of the people I interviewed used that exact quote.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it becomes clear that this is an attribute to a humble hero, to someone who lives with selflessness. They're looking outward. And, it might seem at first, wow, that's kind of it's a burden to carry when you're going through so much. Your business is falling apart, family members are sick, or whatever it is you're going through. Some of these stories have nothing to do with COVID. People are going through a lot. And yet, in the midst of that, if you are looking outward, it's ironic, but it's actually a little freeing.
Mm-hmm.
Freeing not to be self-centered, even when you feel like you deserve it, because you're going through this really difficult thing. It's actually freeing to look outward and see what other people need and get your boots on and roll up your sleeves and get out there and do what you can. And it infuses one with joy. I mean, it's great therapy, really.
It is.
So it's not about me is a mindset that I also found to be contagious with some of the leaders, the people that they worked with, their colleagues, their fellow vets. They grasped that idea. And it's not about me, it's about us.
It's about us.
As a family, it's about us as a neighborhood, it's about us as a country. It's about us, even if I don't know you.
Exactly.
Us. So, yeah, thanks for grabbing onto that theme because it is really
Yes.
strong.
So often, Layla, we hear people say, call me if you need help. And they never come and help. These people didn't wait to be asked. They saw a need and they took action.
Yeah. I'm sure I've been guilty of using that phrase. It's well-meaning, but it's a bit weak.
Yes.
It's kind of hesitant, right? If someone is in a desperate situation, they are unlikely to call.
That's true.
In the mindset to jump out and seek out help. And more than likely, they might sink deeper into that state of desperation. An overcomer, an uplifter, seeks out those who need help. Knocks on the doors of neighbors, phone calls relatives that you don't normally talk to, sees what needs to be done, asks, and then gathers whatever energy and resources. And what I'm finding out is a team. So many of these involve teamwork. I don't know what I'm doing, but let's get started.
Yes, absolutely.
That attitude of let's see what needs to be done and let's get started. And we'll find the resources along the way. We'll figure it out together.
That's so true. Is we get stuck too many times on how am I going to do it instead of going forward, and the doors will open. And one of the first stories that I read when I opened up the book was someone who appeared to absolutely have hit rock bottom. It's something I can't even imagine. And it was dancing while cancering. That story is so compelling. Share that story.
Oh, that's a heart-wrenching story and a powerful story. So Pammy and Scott are a young couple, and they had two little girls, Maddie, 2, and Lily, an infant. I've seen pictures of Maddie and videos of her, and the way they describe her, she's like a modern-day Shirley Temple. I mean, literally singing and dancing her way through the day. Just full of joy. And all of a sudden, she had some unexplainable neck pain. It was diagnosed as a rare, aggressive form of cancer. So she and her mom or dad, they would tag team, were living from home to Lurie Children's Hospital in Chicago to the Shirley Ryan Ability Lab, many times not at home for long periods of time. And what they would do is they would pack a suitcase full of fun. I mean, they had music, they had videos, they had family photos. Pammy said they even had a disco ball that they somehow hung from the hospital ceiling. And every day it would be a little bit different suitcase of fun. Maddie, during this 8-month agonizing process until she passed away, was still full of joy, was infusing joy in everyone around her. And of course, her parents instilled that in her. So what they did with their extreme pain was just so astounding. When Maddie passed, they made a decision that her legacy would continue. Her legacy of miracles and lights, as they call it. And they founded the Dancing While Cancering Foundation. And what they do is they put together these beautiful, bright backpacks. They call them smile packs. They're working with 16 hospitals currently. And those packs are filled with all kinds of fun things that kids and families can do together, kids that have been newly diagnosed with childhood cancer. So it's just a beautiful legacy, a beautiful story. And here's a quote I just found yesterday. This is perhaps the most astounding. This is from Scott. He says, he said this to himself, and then he related it to me. He said, I can't believe I said this, but it was true. He said, this might sound crazy, but this might be the best year of our life.
Wow.
Now, it's about the most difficult thing any family can encounter is the death of a child. So why would it be the best year of his life, of their life? And we talked about that because they were being purposefully present every day, every moment. All the other details of their life were on the periphery, and they were being present to each other fully every day. I thought, oh, that's a lesson.
That is an incredible story. It's you got to get the book just for that story alone, ladies and gentlemen. It is so touching, and there's so many more. Your son is a veteran. We spoke about this, correct? And you stated a story where veterans just jump in. There's something needs to be done. They just do it. What did they do? Tell us the story of what they did.
Well, my son Chris is a Army vet, and he connected me to a friend of his, a colleague of sorts, Ray Doakson. And they're at the same American Legion post in Chicago, very active post, Tatler Post it's called. He says, Mom, you got to talk to this guy. And it was in the very beginning of the pandemic where, as you might remember, there was nothing available. There was no PPE, right?
Right.
And one of the most important forms of PPE is, of course, the shield.
Correct.
Which hospital workers, any frontline workers needed, right? Food workers. So he's involved in something called a maker space, which I didn't know what it was, but it's like this huge space of all kinds of tools and machines, and people also share ideas there. So we had these maker space friends, DePaul University, Chicago Public Library, even the Museum of Science and Industry, this incredible museum in Chicago. All these people got together and hatched a plan. How can we provide PPE to Chicago and to Illinois? And there were so many obstacles. Like they found that you could create the frame of the shield on a 3D printer, right? And then you cut the plastic, right? You can rivet. These are tools we have. Now, 3D printers are not super common. Some of the libraries have them, and people were, some of the obstacles that came up, they won't let us borrow them. They might get broken. What if they can't be repaired? And everyone has to work in their own homes. Nobody can work together. And Ray just kind of sliced through that negativity and the list of obstacles. They were real obstacles, but he's like, no. It's more important that we move forward than we worry about all of these obstacles. So no, we're doing it. Even if a machine comes back broken, we need to save lives. So, and it was just the kind of thing he did in the military. He said they needed parts for like a tank or something, right? So they would requisition parts. They'd order the parts from the US. I don't know when they would come. He said, no, we're not waiting around. We'd go to the car graveyard where there's all these broken down cars. We'd find parts and we would make them work. Because when you see a need, you don't wait, you don't sit around complain and hem and haw and say, do we need permission? All the things that we do, right?
Yep.
Normal times. So in the end, and then they began to get grants and other things that helped. In the end, they produced thousands of face shields and cloth masks, and then they were developing swab kits. I mean, and the vets would deliver. So as soon as they got a batch done, they'd say, we got a batch. And then there were a whole bunch of these vets that were just ready to deliver. They were delivering them to hospitals and all kinds of places in the city and then throughout Illinois. So Ray's focus, and he also said, it's not about me. His focus was the team.
Exactly.
He said, I don't want to do this by myself. I want to bring other people on board, and don't worry about what you know how to do and don't know how to do. Don't worry about it. Get on a team, have a vision, and you'll figure it out. So it was like a vision and a team, two really, really strong things that the military espouses. This 200-member Tatler Post and all of these people in Chicago that helped them. Yeah, and they gave them all for free. They wouldn't charge. They wouldn't be paid, and they wouldn't charge.
Wow.
The time when you could not go on Amazon.com and order a face shield, you could, the hospitals and the people that needed them were getting them. So
I love that story.
Impressive. Ingenuity.
Being a veteran myself, that touches my heart, and I see that a great deal with veterans and active duty military. It's they're there to serve, and
yes,
and even after they leave the military, that doesn't leave. They're to serve.
Right.
Another story where someone was serving that just blew me away. A gentleman that opened up a distillery, and then everything exploded, and how he incorporated an entire community. Tell us that one.
Well, Nick joined the family farm as it is. Bunch of brothers have a family farm not too far from me here in Illinois, and they grow corn. Nick's a 5th generation farmer. He joined them. In 2013, they added on a whiskey distillery to expand the business and a venue. And I've been there. It's a really great event space. And they have really unique whiskeys. The master distiller from Maker's Mark chose them because of the unique things they were doing and their passion. He chose that to mentor them. So they've got this great stuff going on. And he and one of the other gentlemen were out west promoting their whiskey, and they hear the news, everything's starting to get shut down. He says, well, we're shutting down because we're going to protect our employees. Within a week, it became very clear to them that there was a nationwide shortage of hand sanitizer, which was going to be very important in this pandemic. And they had a lot of high-proof alcohol. They had the ingredients that they could transform their whole distillery. But again, they ran into major obstacles, like the FDA and other organizations have all kinds of regulations around production, including an ingredient that makes it unpalatable to children, which is, of course, important. You don't want them eating this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But it was available in 6,000-gallon increments. These are major manufacturers. So they didn't stop. They called their local congressman, and soon the FDA changed its regulations so that these distilleries, and you've heard of other distilleries doing this.
Yes.
Well, these guys helped change the law so that small distilleries could transform magically into hand sanitizer factories. And that's what they did. Their first batch was 150 gallons. They gave it immediately to the local hospital. And then at peak, I think they were creating about 1,500 gallons a day. Everybody wanted them. They were providing all of the hand sanitizer to the county health department, who in turn were distributing it to the community. Even United Airlines wanted in. One of the unique things about this little whiskey distillery was, again, Nick, he started and he ended his interview. It's not about me.
Mm-hmm.
Down. Okay, I'll write it down, Nick. It's about the team. They did not lay off a single employee. It was really important to them that they keep their people working. And it was also really important to them that they provide a need for the community. And they did both. Now, at this time, you could find sanitizer for $50 and $75 a gallon.
Yes.
There was such a need. They were selling it for $25 a gallon. Just to keep the lights on and keep their people employed. It was such a gift to the community. And like I said, that mindset, it just spread. And he said the team really grasped onto what it meant to be there for the community. So the ladies at the whiskey distillery designed this really cool t-shirt, their own version of Rosie the Riveter, except she's making hand sanitizer. I have that t-shirt. And they did it for a fundraiser. They raised thousands of dollars with this popular t-shirt and gave thousands of dollars toward meals for frontline workers and also for the local food bank. So again, it's not about me. It's not even just about our team. It's about the community. And the community will never forget what these people have done.
That's right.
Yeah,
and that
beautiful.
ripple effect opened up more opportunities within that community.
Exactly.
Wow. Those are just amazing stories. We had one that it was really eye-opening, and we had a good conversation when we spoke, and it was about talking and listening has been replaced by yelling on both sides. We all know that. We see it every day. There were the two men from Pittsfield, New York, you told me about, and their story is so compelling. The way they went about opening communication. Share that story.
You know, I know the word heartwarming is kind of cliche, but that's the only word that comes to mind when I talk to these two gentlemen. They just made me smile. It's one of my favorite pieces. So Benjamin and Marcus, two young men who met building cell phone towers together. And Ben is a former Marine, big guy, white, he happens to be white, grew up in a little small town in New York. And Marcus happens to be Black. He's got long dreadlocks, grew up in New York City. I mean, very different backgrounds.
Yes.
But they got to be, as they say, like family, because they're out building these towers and they were out on the road for a long time. And they're best friends. Ben says, there's no color in our friendship. They call each other blood brothers. Marcus calls them Batman and Robin. Very sweet. And so, they've had this relationship. So, fast forward to May of 2020 when the death of George Floyd in Minneapolis, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the protests and the anger that followed. And then the peaceful protesting, and then the violence and the destruction. And Ben said, he already deals with PTSD, but he said he couldn't take it. He couldn't take it. He said, this isn't what I fought for. I fought for justice. And I also didn't fight for people ripping each other apart. We're better than this. And, he was so upset, as all of us were, right?
Yes.
Watching this unfold together, right? So, it's interesting. Did he call his Marine buddies? No, he called Marcus, because Marcus knows him. And he said they just talked for hours through the night. And then Marcus drove over to his house the next morning. And they just sat out there and pulled out a couple lawn chairs, sat on the front lawn, just continued the conversation. He's like, I'm coming over. We're going to talk, And I don't know. It was kind of spontaneous. Marcus said they just found a couple pieces of cardboard, and one of them wrote black and white, and the other one wrote have a beer and have a chat, and they stuck them in the lawn next to their lawn chairs. And it was really beautiful how it unfolded. People started stopping by on this little rural side street and just chatting with them, rolling down their window and just chatting. And I said, well, what would they talk to you about? And Ben's like, well, they're not going to talk about racial issues. You know, that's not how you start a conversation. But it was just the kinds of things you would talk about when you're just making a friend. Hey, where are you from? What are you up to? How are you? And so they did this every week, probably until the New York weather hit, you know,
Right.
every Thursday. They did every Thursday. One time it was the whole neighborhood came. Yeah, and it's brought the neighborhood together, but it's brought a lot of people together. And so I asked them, you know, guys, I'm returning to teaching in the fall. I said, what do I tell these kids? You guys are making it work. What do we need to heal the wounds, the cumulative wounds of America? And we have a lot of wounds right now.
Yes.
And their answer was so simple and so beautiful. It was get to know each other, listen to each other, treat each other like friends. Get to know your actual neighbors on your street. And Ben just kept talking about listening. You know, just listen to what their issues are, listen to what their concerns are. And Marcus just kept saying, you know, it's a two-sided street. You don't have to change yourself, but be open-minded. And these are just simple social skills that we use all the time with our friends.
Mm-hmm.
So couldn't we use them with people we don't know? I think that would go a long way in mending the hearts of our country.
I love that story. It's dialogue, not talking at someone,
Absolutely.
dialogue back and forth and listening to understand. You may never, ever agree, but you at least understand
Yes.
that deep down, they're good people. They just believe something different. And that's okay.
Right.
That's okay. The communities just came together so many times. There's one story, being Italian, that touched my heart was a pizza for people. This little pizzeria that was struggling, and how the community came. What was all that about?
Pizza for the people. That's such a cute story. So Katie Graves got wind that Luigis Pizza and Fun Center, this establishment in our town that's been around forever, was really struggling. So much to the point that the owner had shared he'd taken out a second mortgage in order to pay, just to pay his workers, and it was still going down. So she had gotten her first stimulus check, and she had canceled her vacation to the Cayman Islands. And she said, you know what? She'd never even been to the pizza place. I've been there 100 times. She's never even been there. She said, I just couldn't let it go. I knew there was something I could do. So she took that money that she had saved, and she met with the owner, and she said, I want to do something here. So they were going to hand out hot pizzas. They realized, well, that would be impossible to hand out hundreds of hot pizzas at the same time. So they made pizza kits, bake your own pizza kits. $1,500 worth. She started with 1,000, and people started adding to it and adding to it. So in the end, $1,500 of bake your own pizza kits, free for the community. So she's helping this business that is so dear to the community, and she's feeding families. Anyone that wants them, come and get it. There's a newspaper article, come and get it. Drive right up, and they're just handing them through the windows. And they handed all of them out, and there were still people in line. It's just such a beautiful giving act, and it inspired more. So the next weekend, a not-for-profit organization said, we're going to do the same thing. we're going to help Luigis, and we're going to give away pizzas to all frontline workers. Same thing. So all of a sudden, he had this huge influx of cash to help buoy up the business. And it was cool because Bill Poss, the owner, has done so much for the community. I mean, the teachers gather there, there's chemistry study sessions, there's birthday parties. But we had a shooting in our city a couple years ago, next door to Luigi's. And immediately they opened the doors of this huge pizzeria to all of the workers, all of the police, everybody that was bringing down this crazy conflict. They fed them, they housed them. And this is how they are. And then when it was all over, they had a reunion of all the families of all the people who had helped with that crazy shooting. And they had face painting and prizes and free pizza. And this is how these guys are. This is how Italians are, right? It's
Yes, exactly.
I don't know if he's Italian, but that's just the community-minded vision of this place. And for him to be able to receive back from the community was a really beautiful thing.
Supporting the small businesses has been something we've heard quite a bit. And this is why you support the small businesses in your community, because they're the ones who buy your Girl Scout cookies. They're the ones who sponsor your softball teams. They're the ones who are always there when you need them. And now it's time for us to, and what she did was just incredible. What an incredible thing. And regardless of what your state is, whatever your health condition, you had a story of a gentleman in the late stages of ALS, the Lou Gehrig's disease, and he could barely do anything, but he was engaged. Yeah. What was that?
Well, Mark Herwald, who's been a youth minister to teenagers his entire life, often seen walking around with a megaphone and a smile and a pat on the back. This is a guy who, it's a special kind of person that wants to hang out with teenagers.
Wow.
Wants to hang out with teenagers all the time, right? And, they bring with them their angst. They bring with them their questions, their rebellion, everything, and their joy and their passion. And he was always just about, you are an integral part of this community. He didn't say it in those words, but they felt it. You are loved. God has a special plan for you. That was always his message. So he's been doing this for his whole career. 2017, he gets a surprising diagnosis. He doesn't know what's going on, and he finds out he's got ALS. And as you know, that's like Lou Gehrig's disease, right? It's
correct.
There's no cure.
Mm-hmm.
Just your body, bit by bit, becomes unworkable. We saw him with a cane, then the next thing you know, he's in a wheelchair. He's got a feeding tube. I mean, he can't move. He can do very little, but what he does do is so powerful. His mind is working perfectly. Mm-hmm. His sense of humor is still there. He's still a Cubs fan. So this man with so much to say is still using his voice. He can't speak, but his eyes can move. He can move his eyes. He can move his mouth the tiniest bit. And he uses this machine with eye gaze technology that types for him. So what does he do with his time and energy? He continues to uplift. He writes uplifting blogs. He shares stories. He's continuing to evangelize, continuing his ministry in a sense. It might take him 2 weeks to write a blog. That's how difficult it is. But he's got thousands of followers. And, of course, he didn't wish this. His wife is now his full-time caretaker. She can't even have other people come in and out of the house now because of the pandemic. She herself has fibromyalgia, and she is lovingly, joyfully caring for him. It is an amazing duo, these two. What they are doing with their suffering is the most astounding part of it. Do they ask for it? No. Do they want it? No. They are embracing it. And Mark said, suffering's really complicated.
Yes, it is.
And screamed at God. But it looks like I'm going to be dealing with this. But he said, it's amazing. Thousands of people have been impacted because of my suffering.
Exactly.
I've been inspired and impacted. So,
well, Layla, after hearing and writing all these amazing stories, where do we go from here? How do we continue this?
Well, a big part of the purpose for writing this book and for speaking is so that we don't just go on with our life. The vaccine has arrived. It's going to take some time before this is all over. Elections are over, and we'll have more. We'll have more versions of chaos, right?
Yes.
But my hope is that we don't just go on as if nothing happened. That we have learned some really key lessons from these heroes, from our own experiences and those around us, so that as we move forward, hopefully we're a little different. Hopefully we've opened our eyes enough and changed a bit. As my friend Denise in one of the stories, Suburban Housewife Goes to Africa, she says, we're all recalibrating. Well, we're not all recalibrating, but we all should be recalibrating.
Yes.
What does that mean? Well, it's not just stuff you do because you have to. But hopefully we're learning that it is our obligation, our joyful obligation, to check how and see how the neighbors are doing. Like you said, not wait till someone gives you a call and they're desperate. Hopefully we're learning that family is absolutely so important and so loved that we're checking in on them and really checking in. We're calling them regularly when we can't see them and finding out how they're doing. Hopefully we're using our gifts and talents wherever they're needed. We're seeking out opportunities to give where they're needed, whether it's our neighborhood or a bigger community. And I know for myself, I've taken in a lot, and I'm letting go of some things, some obligations that I think, I was really doing a little bit too much. I'm learning how to be a little unhurried. I don't know if that's a real word, but
it works. That works. It's
if we don't learn from these tough times, we've wasted a great opportunity.
Absolutely.
To take these lessons and become stronger, more resilient people.
Absolutely. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we are just about out of time. I want to thank Layla one more time for this amazing book, these amazing stories. You can find her on LinkedIn. You can get her on Facebook and LinkedIn. You can contact me, and I will make sure information gets to her. You want to read this book, and you want to have her speak at your event, because this is something that is so uplifting. And there are 8 words that we've talked about in the past that are so important. I see you, I hear you, you matter. And that's what this book is about. And that's everything that she has put together. It's incredible. So, ladies and gentlemen, as I said, we're just about out of time. No matter what life throws at you, and we heard a bunch of what life's going to throw at you today, please do 3 things. Look up, get up, and never, ever give up. Start moving forward, and better times and better people like Layla and all these people in this book will come into your life. If you want more information about Layla, you can contact her at the Facebook and LinkedIn. You can contact me and I will make sure it gets to her. You can see this on Roku TV or on my YouTube page, Frank Zaccari. And if you use, and I also send a link to Layla, so she'll put it in all the places where she posts. If you use the YouTube link, please subscribe. Now, let me leave you with this, ladies and gentlemen, as I do every week. None of us are in this alone. And the secret to walking on water is to know where the rocks are. And today, Layla has shown us where many of those rocks are. Join me again next week when we discuss another life-altering event. Thank you again, Layla.
Thank you. It was great to be with you.